This is the lecture for Coding from Scratch Week 2. So we're going to cover JavaScript, terminal, and source control. If you have any questions or confused by anything I say throughout the lecture, just unmute yourself and just ask away. Since you're the only one here, just feel free to interrupt. We can make it a more informal session. But let's go ahead and get started. All right, so this is Coding from Scratch, JavaScript, terminal, and source control. So what is JavaScript? JavaScript is the programming language of the web. It is the only programming language understood by every single modern web browser. JavaScript enables us to build the interactive websites we use daily. So essentially what JavaScript is, it's like the muscle of any website. It allows that user interaction that we create. In order to connect our JavaScript to our HTML, we need to include a script tag with one attribute, the source attribute, where you're going to put a relative URL as to where the file is. So I have some pre-written code here. I have an HTML and CSS file, and then I have a script.js file. So what we're going to do is I'll erase this real quick, and we are going to connect the JavaScript file to the HTML file. So what you want to do is you want to put a script tag at the end of your body. So you want to make sure it's right before that closing tag of your body. The reason for that is it loads from top to bottom. So usually in some JavaScript files, you might have an alert or some timed options. You want to make sure that the page is fully loaded before your results are ran. So here I'm going to put my script, and then we are going to use the source attribute, and then we are going to tell it the relative location to the file. It's directly in our folder, so we're just going to do script.js. So now the JavaScript file and the HTML file are connected. I'm going to erase this real fast here. That is later on. All right, so now we have our JavaScript file and our HTML file connected, so they can now talk to each other. So let's jump into the basics of JavaScript. So the first thing you want to know off the bat is variables. Variables are your containers. They hold a value, and you can reuse those values throughout your website, your applications, your program, whatever you're doing with JavaScript. When declaring a variable in JavaScript, we use the var keyword, followed by the name of the variable. You also use let and const, which you'll learn later on. But for the very basics of it all, we're going to put var for variable. There are different types of variables. So when you're declaring a new variable, it can have a different data type. There are strings, which is essentially like a string of characters, and you represent that with quotations. So anything inside of quotations is considered a string, and basically anything we can type on the keyboard. Then we have numbers, which could be 15, -5, 1,000, 1,000,000, any number. Then we have Booleans, which is going to be either true or false. And then we have objects. So an object could be something like a student, and that student has attributes. You have first name, last name, student ID number, year of graduation, things like that. We're not going to get into objects in this lecture, but just so you know that a variable could equal an object, you'll learn that in the next course. So in this example here, we have a variable declaration. We have the var, then the variable name, and then we have an equal sign, and then what that value is, followed by a semicolon. So in this case right here, we're looking at the variable student name, which is of type string. So if I were to declare some variables here, I could have var age. We could set that equal to a number. We could have var name, which could be a string. We can have var is instructor. That could be a Boolean, just so you can see the different types of variables you can create. So that is, in short term, how you declare a variable, right? Oops. So the next thing I want to talk about is if statements. So let's say we have these variables that we're working with, and now we need to check if these variables are equal to something, greater than something, less than something, not equal to something. That's when we're going to start introducing decision constructs or a conditional statement. Essentially, all we're talking about are if statements. There's different types of if statements, and they kind of build on top of each other. But the fundamental of an if statement is you're going to have the keyword if, followed by parentheses. Inside of the parentheses is what you're checking. So if I'm checking to see if age is greater than 21, I would put that in between my parentheses. Then I'm going to have a set of curly brackets. Whatever goes inside of those curly brackets is the code that's going to be executed if the condition inside of the parentheses is in fact true. So let's just go ahead and play around with some code so you can see. So if I write an if statement, I'm just going to set it up here. And if I say if age is greater than or equal to 21, then I'm going to console.log, hey, let's get a beer. Okay. So what this is going to do, it's going to look at the variable age, check its value, and then it's going to check to see if that value is greater than or equal to 21. Since age is equal to 29, this code in between the curly brackets will execute. So then we should expect, hey, let's get a beer. So I'm going to save this, and then I'm just going to open the terminal here. And I am going to run my code. So node. And here we can see, hey, let's get a beer. If you're wondering how I got to the terminal, you hit Control tilde and it will open up the terminal. And then you need to download Node. And then once you do, you can just write Node and then the name of your JavaScript file in order to print out a console. So this is kind of considered a console when you run it. And then we have, hey, let's get a beer. Now, if I change the age to 15, I shouldn't expect anything to print out because age is not greater than or equal to 21. So this code will not execute. And we don't get anything. In those cases, you can use an else statement. So else, I'm going to console.log, you're too young for beer. Save that. So now we should expect you're too young for beer since the age is 15. And that's exactly what we get. So that is an example of an if-else statement. So we've seen an if statement and we've seen an if-else statement. But what if there's multiple conditions you need to check? So that's where an if-else-if statement comes into play. So we could do else if age, let's say, less than 21 and age is greater than or equal to 13. So what this and symbol here, the two ampersands means that both of these conditions need to be true in order for whatever I write in between these curly brackets to occur. So if that's the case, we're looking at the ages of 13 to 20. We can say console.log. Let's see. How about a juice box? I don't know. I'm just writing random sentences here. All right. So if we save that, since we're looking at the age 15, we should now expect how about a juice box when we run the code. Because is 15 greater than or equal to 21? No, it's not. So this code is ignored. Else if age is less than 21 and greater than or equal to 13, 15 is. So this should run. And if this runs, then it skips this code and it goes down, jumps to here. Okay, so when you're doing if, else statements, they're all considered like a chunk of code together. So if one portion of that runs, then it's gonna go ahead and jump out of that conditional statement. So if I go ahead and run this, let me save this. Then we get how about a juice box. So this is very fundamental decision constructs. Are there any, do you have any questions on if, else, if statements before I jump on to the next topic? Went through that kind of fast. Good? Okay. All right, so those are if statements. The next thing I want to talk about are arrays. An array is a data structure that we use to store values. Essentially, you can think of arrays as like a list of items, a collection of values. You can use an array to store multiple values. The way that we write an array, so let's say I'm declaring a new array. I have var, and then I'm going to have my array name. Let's say I call it groceries. And then to indicate that it's an array, you use square brackets. And then every element in the array is separated by a comma. So let's say we have an array of strings. So I need to buy orange juice, I need to buy coffee, yogurt, and let's say bananas. Okay. So here I have an array called groceries, and it has 4 elements inside of it, all of data type string. And we have orange juice, coffee, yogurt, bananas. So when you have a list of items, you need a way to keep track of where everything is, and you kind of need an index, kind of like at the end of a book, you have an index to see where a certain topic is. So we need to index these elements so we can have a better track of them. So with arrays, there's something called an index, and it's pointing to the value in the array. With arrays, index sets start at 0 instead of 1. So normally we're used to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but with coding, it starts with a 0. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3. So here, orange juice would be index 0, coffee would be index 1, yogurt would be index 2, and bananas would be index 3. So if I wanted to console.log groceries at index 2, what should I expect to see? Which one of these is it going to be?
Should be yogurt.
Yep, it should be yogurt. So let's go ahead and run it. And we have yogurt. So that's how index works. So remember, they always start at 0. Now, there's different methods you can use on arrays. So one of them is length. So that's going to return the total number of elements in the array. So if I do groceries.length and I console.log groceries.length, I should expect what number?
You should expect 4.
Yep. And that's exactly what we get. We get 4. So one thing to remember, if you don't know the last index number, or you're creating a loop later on, you can always find the length of the array and then subtract 1. So you know that if an array has a length of 4, that the last index number is going to be 3. And conversely, if you know the last index number is 3, then you know that the length is 4, and so on and so forth. So that's one method you can use, but let's say you needed to add something to the list. I forgot to add avocados. So I'm going to do groceries.push And then inside of the parentheses, I'm going to say what I want to add to the array. I'm going to put avocados. And then I'm just going to console.log groceries so you can see that it adds it. I'm going to save that. And here we have avocados. One thing I want to point out with the dot push method is it's going to push it at the end of the array. Always, always, always is going to be put at the end of the array. And conversely to that, we have the dot pop method. Dot pop, you cannot specify what you want to remove. Dot pop is always going to remove just the last item on the list. So if I do dot pop, it's going to remove the last item on the list, which is avocados, since we just added that. So if I were to console.log groceries, then we should expect the original list. Yep. One thing I would challenge you to do after lecture is try to figure out what methods will get you to take out a specific item. So let's say I wanted to remove coffee specifically, but I didn't know if it was even in the array, and if it was, where it was. So that's a little extra challenge to do on your own. If you have any questions or if you cannot figure it out, just message me otherwise. But that is a little practice problem I like to give people when working with arrays. We don't have time to do it here, but definitely try it on your own and message me if you have any problems.
Can I message you on Slack?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
All right, so that is arrays in a very small nutshell. Do you have any questions on arrays?
Honestly, I'm at JavaScript 3 right now in the lessons. Okay. So I'm pretty comfortable with this at this point. I did have some trouble yesterday, but I got my questions answered pretty immediately.
Okay, so where are you right now in the...
I'm towards the end of JavaScript 3.
Like DOM manipulation?
Yeah, I'm doing DOM inner HTML properties.
Okay, perfect. How are you feeling about loops?
About loops? I'm pretty comfortable with loops. They make sense. Because, at first I was having some trouble, but then I was just practicing writing it out in pseudocode. That way I would take step by step to try to understand exactly what was going on. So after doing that with a lot of the examples, that I was able to understand what was going on. It was definitely harder to understand than HTML or CSS.
Yeah, it's a little bit of reprogramming the brain in that.
It is. But no.
Awesome. So the next topic I was going to talk about loops, but since you feel pretty comfortable, if you want to tell me how to write a loop just to print out every item in the array with just a for loop here.
And by print out, you mean like to show up in the console,
like
right?
A console, yeah, exactly.
All right. So for, and then you would put in parentheses var.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would set that to I equal 0.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would put the semicolon, and then you would put I, and then the is less than, and we're going to put groceries, and then we're going to put dot length.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then another semicolon, and then it's going to be I, then plus plus.
Awesome.
All right, and so the next line, it's going to be, I'm sorry, what were we trying to do? We're trying to print.
We're just console logging each item in the array.
Shouldn't that do it on its own?
Well, we don't have a console log in here, so right now we have.
With the console log, if you were to do that, wouldn't that all be all we need for the?
But what would we need to put inside of the parentheses in the console log?
Oh, groceries.
Okay. Like that?
Yes. Right?
Let's see. All right. So here, let me comment that out. And we have that. So I did it four times. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's because of the dot length. So I did it because of the number of times.
Yeah, so what I was looking for, and you're so close, is I'm looking to print out each item individually. So when we do this loop, then we do groceries at index I.
Oh, okay. So was the length okay? Because it still has to go through the length of each item.
The way that you set up the for loop is perfect. It's just a matter of, so we want orange juice to print out by itself, then coffee, then yogurt, then bananas. Because what this for loop is doing is you set up this index I, and it starts at 0, because indexes start at 0. Mm-hmm. And then you're saying I less than groceries dot length. And if we evaluate that, we mean I less than 4. And the reason why we want that is because the last index is 3. So once that index hits 4, we know the array is done.
Yeah.
And then the I++ to increment the I as you're doing every iteration. And then you're console logging groceries at index I. Since I is always changing, first it starts at 0. So groceries at index 0, orange juice. Then at 1, coffee, 2, yogurt, 3, bananas. So then when we run this code, oops, I didn't save it.
There you go.
Get them in a list like that.
All right, that's pretty close. I just gotta remember that last part.
Super close, super close. But yeah, great job. So now let's say I have a for loop and I want to check if coffee is on the list, and if it is, I want to say, yay, I love coffee. Okay.
All right. So then, all right. So it's going to be, all that stuff in the beginning. So then, I have to picture this in my head.
Yeah, no problem.
So here, and we're checking to see if we have,
if coffee is on the array, and if
so it'd be like if, it would be the little I, equals, and then in parentheses coffee. Sorry, not in parentheses, quotes.
Quotation.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, and then we would do the console log. Yeah. Oh, wait, hold up. There's something. Wait, hold up.
I'm gonna let you catch it. Don't worry.
Because I know there's something missing there. I know the I needs to be in brackets, and then the equal, there needs to be 3.
Yep. Okay. So, wrong one. Oops, not 4. And then we want this to be groceries at I, because remember, I is our index.
Oh, okay.
Because I is 0, and then it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's just keeping track of where we are in the array, but we want to look at the actual value at that point. So that's why we want to do groceries at index I. So we're looking at groceries at 0, which is orange juice. Is orange juice equal to coffee? No, it doesn't do anything. Goes on to the next one. Groceries at 1, coffee is equal to coffee. Then we print out I love coffee, and then so on and so forth. All right, so if we run that, we should get, yay, I love coffee. Cool?
Yeah.
All right, good job. Yay. All right. It's so exciting to have a student who actually did the work before they came. All right, so that's loops, and then we have functions. How are you feeling about functions?
Since I'm just getting into it, I'm all right.
Okay, so
I understand the basics because of what I have so far. Because I have notes right here, so I understand, like, there's the function, you want it to do something, and then first you have a name for it, and then right underneath you write the code that you want it to do, and then from there you could put anything in there. So as long as you have as long as you have the parameter set, then it'll execute the code.
Right. So if we're looking at a function, now functions can have as many parameters as you need, or it can be 0 parameters. So let's say we had a function that doesn't require any parameters. It just says, hi, how are you? Let's say we have a function called greeting. So we're going to declare function, write the word function, then the name of the function, followed by parentheses. And then in your curly brackets, it's going to be what you want the function to actually do. So in here, I'm going to do not assert dot log, hi, how are you? And then we have our function. Now this right here does not do anything. I have not called on the function. I haven't invoked the function. This is just a definition, like in a dictionary.
Yeah.
So here, in order to call in the function, you write the name of the function, followed by the parentheses, and then the semicolon. So this is a function that doesn't require any parameters. So this should just print out, hi, how are you? Now, if we had a function that does require parameters, let's say, let's just adjust this one here. And we wanted to include a name, right? We need to pass in a name. And now I want to say, hi, the name.
Yeah.
Then we can do, here we go, plus name. And then,
oh, I hate when it does that.
yeah. All right. So now this is just a twist on the same function, but now it requires a parameter. So now when we call on the function, we need to pass in a parameter. So let's just say Linda, and then save that. So now we get that. And I probably want to add a space here. Save that. And now we have a function that requires a parameter. So that's bare bones basics function 101. But what you're going to get functions that are going to involve a for loop with an if statement inside, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and jump into the, well, before I jump into that, let's go ahead and discuss scope. So we've looked at functions, we've looked at block statements, we've kind of looked at the very basics of JavaScript. What scope is, it is the area in which your variables and functions can be accessed. There's 3 kinds of scopes. You're gonna have global scope, function scope, and block scope. Global scope is declared outside of a block or a function, so it can be accessed anywhere. Anywhere in the code, you can access this variable. That's going to be global scope. Function scope is accessed only within the curly brackets of the actual function.
Would that be local then?
In some languages, it's called local, local variable.
Yeah, in the lessons, it described only global and then local. It didn't describe function or block.
Yeah, local, it's kind of tricky because local is like local to that region, whether that be a function or a block. But there is a difference between function and block scope, which would both be called local scope. So to dive deeper into local scope, function scope is just within that function. And then there is the let keyword was introduced in ES5. And that's within any set of curly brackets. So it doesn't have to be inside of a function. It just has to be like, for example, if I wrote this if statement, and then within these, let's see if I uncommented this out. If I were to say, let coffee equal, what is a coffee brand? I'll just say Folgers, even though I would never drink it. So here, and then here I can do plus coffee. Yeah.
And then we put
so then
at the end of that, the yellow.
Oh.
So there is a strategic way to use variable like var and let because every
Oh,
single
yes. Yes,
video the
definitely.
guy is always doing let instead of variable. So which I thought was
Right.
weird. So I'm like, why would there be two different kinds? You
So
know,
the reason why you would want to use let more than variable, it's because it's kind of like a temporary variable. It's not going to allocate space on storage to store that information. Let is saying, hey, it's just for this little chunk of code. I just need the variable here, and then I'm going to use it here. And then once I'm out of this chunk of code, I don't need it anymore.
okay.
So it's like memory allocation. Also, it helps you keep track of your variables. If you have a bunch of global scope variables, you could accidentally be changing your variables in one, like in a function. Let's say I had a name variable outside, like here I have the greeting name here. And then let's say this was still here, which is considered global scope. And I changed name equal to, let's say, Alex, then it's going to change the name to Alex. So now this name is now equal to Alex when it's supposed to equal Cassandra the whole time.
Okay.
So that's why you want to avoid global scope, because you can mess yourself up, because a lot of the times you're going to be using a lot of the same variable names. Like you don't want to get too lengthy, and being creative on the spot for variable names is too much because you're just trying to code. So that's where you want to be careful and kind of focus on local scope more than global scope. Yeah. So
Okay.
does that make sense?
It does. It does. It makes perfect
Okay.
sense.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, those are the different types of scopes, and you definitely want to be aware of that when you're coding. I've had a lot of students not know why their code was wrong, and it's because they were trying to access a variable that wasn't accessible, or vice versa. So just keep that in mind when you're coding on the different types of scopes.
Alrighty.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into the DOM. The DOM is a document object model. It is a programming interface for your HTML documents. It provides a visual representation of the HTML elements you place in your document. Essentially, it's what we see on the web browser. So if on this code I hear, this is the DOM. What I'm seeing is the DOM. It's a visual representation of the HTML code that I have previously written. So here, the goal of this is to enter these names, and then I click this button and it will say hello with the full name.
Okay.
So in order to do that, we use DOM manipulation. So let me comment these out. We don't need these. All right. So if we're looking at, this is where the HTML and the JavaScript come together. So in the HTML, we have 3 input fields. We have first name, middle name, and last name. In order for me to grab that information from the DOM and put it into my JavaScript, I need to grab some elements either by their ID, or there's different ways that you can grab elements. The way I'm going to show you is by ID, because then we are looking for something specific. But let's say you were making like a multiple choice quiz, and you need to grab a chunk of answers and see which one's checked. Then maybe you want to grab it by tag name. There's a bunch of different ones out there, but they all kind of have the same concept.
Yeah.
So here, I'm just going to put IDs for all of these. So the ID is going to be first for first name. And then we have ID equals middle. And then we're going to have ID equals last. Okay. So then when I go back to my JavaScript, I'm going to grab these elements. And one thing I want to show you is, in case you're not sure what you're writing is exactly right and you're grabbing the right stuff, sometimes I like to go straight into the console first. So I just did inspect, and then I went to my console. So I'm going to do document get element by ID, and then I'll have my parentheses, and then inside of that I have my ID name. So I'm going to do first And then I'll put well, let me create a variable here. Okay, and if I hit enter, and then if I hit first, it gives me the whole thing because it's grabbing the HTML element. So the HTML element's like the whole thing. What we want is what the user wrote inside of there. So if I wrote something in here, then
you put dot value, right?
Yep, you put dot value. So first dot value is gonna give me Cassandra. So when you first start coding, I recommend going to the console just to double check what you're writing is what you think it is. Because when you're writing in the text editor, you can't exactly see what you're grabbing. So now that I know that that works, I can create some variables. I'm going to do var first equals document dot get element by ID. ID is first, value, and then we're going to do the same for middle and last. All right, so now we have whatever the user wrote. So now I'm going to put full name, create a new variable called full name, and I am just going to add them all together, but I'm going to add a space in between them. Okay. Because then it will run all together.
Yeah.
So here. I got a new keyboard, so I'm like, all over. Okay. Okay, so here, hold on, my other computer is ringing. 1 second.
Alrighty.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so here we have the full name, first, middle, and last. So we've grabbed all those values, and now we've made it one happy family. And now we want to put that out onto the DOM. So in order to do that, we need to have a space available in order to write that out to the DOM. So I have a paragraph element here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add an ID here. I'm going to call it full name. And then so here in my JavaScript, I can grab that element. So we're kind of going to do the opposite. So first we were grabbing values, and now we're going to put something into the DOM. So I'm going to, first I need to grab the element just as we did before. And then the ID was full name. And then instead of doing dot value, what we're going to do is dot inner HTML. And what inner HTML is basically the text in between the opening and closing tag. Currently, there is no text in between there. So that's why we put an equal sign, and we're going to put something in there. So I'm going to put hello and then plus full name. Okay. So that is that. But if we try to run this, let me refresh this. Oh, hello.
Because you put the name in, right? Because you had two overlying right there, because you have the first all your variables, and then you have the var full name. So wouldn't you have to input it first so that it has everything, and then it would put that in?
Yeah, so what we need to do is we need to connect the button so that this code, because this code is just running, but we only want it to run when it's that button. So what we need to do is add an attribute of onClick to the button. And then what onClick is going to equal to is the function name that you want to perform. So here, let's just call it greeting. So then when we go to our JavaScript code, we want to make sure that we have a function greeting, and all of this is inside of there. So now this won't run until that button is pushed. So if we refresh here, now we get it.
Alrighty, that's cool.
Yeah, so if let's say we wanted to do something different. So let's say, let me just comment this out. And let's say I wanted to do enter some text below, and then I'm going to have a text area, and I'm going to give it the ID of text. And then we're going to have our button on click, call it count. We're going to have a text area, and we're going to count the total number of A's in the text, or total number of spaces. Let's do that. That's a little bit easier. So here I'm going to do PID equals results. And there we have it. So here we refresh this. We have the text area and a click. So what we want to do is we want to first declare our function, which I've called count. So we have our function declared. Then we want to grab the text area element and grab the value, what the user put. So I'm going to put var user text equals document.get element by ID. Then we're going to say text and dot value. Just like we did for the inputs, we're doing the same thing for the text area. And then we are going to have to go through every single character in that text to see if it is a space. So what we want to do is we want to count the number of spaces. So I'm going to create a variable, let's call it spaces, and I'm going to initially set it equal to 0. Okay, because I haven't counted anything yet. So now I need to go through every single character in that text. So what do you think I'm going to have to write?
For loop.
Yep, exactly. So for, and then just how you set up the loop before, we would have I 0, and then we're going to have I less than user text dot length. So user text is technically a string, but you can think of it as an array full of a bunch of character elements. And then we're going to do I plus plus. And then in there, we're going to check to see if it's a space. So now I need to include our if statement. So if user text at index I, just like we did for groceries, is equal to space, then I'm going to increment my spaces count by 1. So you can do plus plus. And then we're going to do that for the whole text. So this loop is going to go through every single one of those characters. If it is a space, then it's going to increment our spaces variable. So now I can go ahead and print out those results to the DOM. So we'll do document.get element by ID, then results.inner HTML, and then we can say there are plus spaces, which represents the total number of spaces in the text. Okay?
Okay.
So now, if we refresh this, I am writing something. Okay, so here I see 1,
Like
2,
three.
3. So I should expect 3 spaces. There are 3 spaces in the text. So that is combining
crazy.
everything.
Yeah, it
So
is.
that is if statements, for loops, variables, DOM manipulation, things are just going to keep adding on top of each other. So,
You know, when you said that you were going to do that, it just sounded like an insane thing to try to type out on JavaScript, but it's so simple.
yeah, and it's really just a matter of breaking it down. I've been doing this for years, so I can just go, but you need to break it down like, okay, I grabbed the text. Now what do I do with it? Well, I need to look at every single character. How do I do that? Oh, I could do a loop. Okay, now I'm looking at every single one. So now I have to check to see if it's space. How do I do that? Conditional statement. Okay, if statement. And then you just keep adding and adding.
Yeah.
So it's real, what you do with the pseudocode is what I recommend to everybody. Just write it out by hand first. Just answer those questions. What do I know? What do I need to know? What do I need to do? And then the code kind of just spills out by itself.
It does. You know, because at first I was like, I don't know how they're getting any of this. It just looks like they're just writing things down. And like in the videos, the guy doesn't explain it very well. So I don't, because he keeps using examples that kind of just fly over my head. So when he was doing first introducing for loops, he was talking about how a recipe called for 4 cups of flour, and then he wrote down like, you know, every single time you add 1 cup of flour into the bowl. But then when he set the, let's see, the, what was it? I wrote it down. So this doesn't make sense. Oh, it's right here. All right, so he set, okay, his first variable was cup of flour called for, which was set to equal 4, because that's what the recipe called for. And then he set a second variable to current cups. So then he created a for loop.
Cup of, I'm going to do it with you. Cup of flour.
Okay, cups of flour.
Equal 4.
Okay. And then a second current cups.
Current cups. And that initially was 0.
He didn't put anything on there.
Oh, he just left it like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it said, then we put the for loop. It's, you know, variable, I set to 0, then, you know, semicolon, I is less than cups of flour called for, then semicolon, and then I plus plus. And then the code block is going to be current cups equals, then there are currently, you know, plus I cups of flour in the bowl. So then what didn't make sense to me was that the I was set to less than cups of flour. Because if you needed 4 cups of flour, then you should be setting it to equal, not less than. And I just couldn't get it until somebody was explaining to me that, well, basically that 4 is meant for how many loops it's going to go through. Because at first there's 0 and then plus 1. Yeah, and then it's first, because it's set to 0 and then it's plus 1. And then, you know, then it's 1 plus 1 again. And
that's
what threw me off.
Tricky to see. I mean, if it were me, I would set this equal to 1 and this to 5, or equal to cup of flour. That's how I would approach it.
Yeah, like it didn't make any sense at all. Like that makes more sense. So like eventually, like I tried to get some help, and I ended up just figuring it out, you know, based off the information. Because they're like, look, you gotta look at your console log. You gotta look at that, because then it tells you, it spits out these 4 bits of information. Well, I'm like, yeah, but it says 0, 1, 2, 3. That's only 3 cups. You need like the 4th cup. So that was what was driving me crazy. And now with the what was he using? I don't know if it was with the it was calling a function. He was using like a car wash analogy, and he's like, oh, you know, all right now, all you have the instructions on how to wash a car, but you still gotta actually wash the car. So like, that was also like a little more confusing because you know, everything he was trying to tie one thing to another, and then you know,
Mm-hmm.
none of it was making sense. But like eventually it was after hearing it enough. But you know, honestly, I was just ignoring the analogy and I was just looking at his code because because it just wasn't making any sense.
Right, right, right.
Because like he's trying to put this kind of different language, abstract different language onto something that we're supposed to know and be familiar with, but it's not
Yeah.
connecting.
Yeah, I mean, again, analogies are special because they can make complete sense to one person, but not to another.
Yeah.
So it just really depends. But also with that, since there's so many different ways to approach one problem, the way that he had done it maybe doesn't work with how your brain works, you know?
Mhm.
And then you have to start off with one because that makes more sense to you when it in this particular situation.
Mhm.
That's how my brain works. So I would start off with one and then just be like less.
Well, I'm glad we're on the same wavelength then.
um, Cool. So, did you have any other questions of stuff that you were working through?
I do have one random question. So let's
Mm-hmm.
say I had my HTML, my CSS, and my JavaScript, right, all in separate files. If
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to, would I be also able to have like another language in there, like PHP or Ruby? Like,
Oh, yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
By the end of this program, you're gonna have so many different types of files in there.
okay, because
Mm-hmm.
I know there's gonna be Angular or you know whatever the
Yeah,
opposite.
yeah. You're gonna have a lot. You By the end of this program, you're gonna be blown away by the number of files that you work with.
I bet.
Yeah, I would.
Besides
Yeah.
that, no, I mean, I'm still working through it. More than anything else, I just need practice. Like I
Right.
need, you know what you were doing, where you're just like, okay, we're trying to do this now. Figure it out. Tell me what I'm supposed to do. And then, because that's what I need. Because you know, the projects afterwards, like I do all three of them, but
Mm-hmm.
that's really limited because they're
Well,
really they're
if you
asking
ever
for very few things.
right, if you want that extra work, just hit me up on Slack. You're like, hey, I finished my project. Like, I want more practice. Can you give me some extra? Because I have a whole list of brain teasers for this stuff, and they're like mini problems. But I can definitely send you those. You just message me, and I can send you them. And then once you get that figured out, send you another one, and so on and so forth.
All
Um,
right,
so if you have that extra time to work on extra stuff, then just let me know.
I do. I don't have a job, so I got all day.
Oh, okay. All right. So then that is JavaScript in a nutshell. Super tiny nutshell. It will be expanded as the program goes on. Another thing I want to touch on, you saw me use it, the Chrome inspector on
Mhm.
Google Chrome is going to be your best friend. Especially in the console, when you have your errors, this is where it's going to appear and it will tell you like the exact line of code
Yeah,
that it's
I've
going
seen it
wrong.
before because I
Okay,
use
perfect.
Atom, text editor, and right
Uh-huh.
before I was putting in my projects for the previous JavaScript with the beginning of for loops. I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to make sure I understood it and I was not doing it wrong, so that I could open up in a browser and just check it out in the console log there. So
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it. I've seen it like, hey, this is an error. This doesn't make sense, and I'm like, oh, okay. So
Yeah,
no,
okay.
I've gone through it before.
Perfect. Perfect. That's going to be your best friend for the rest of your life. Um,
Okay.
Terminal. So the terminal is topic after JavaScript. Essentially what it is, it's an interface that you can type and execute text-based commands. So normally we're used to a GUI, which is this interface that we're used to. We right click, make a new folder, et cetera, et cetera. So the terminal gets rid of that for us. It's these basic commands. It makes you feel like a cool 90s hacker. At least it did for me when I learned it. And there's some basic commands that you'll be constantly using. So depending on what kind of machine you're working on, the commands differ a little bit. I will be showing you Mac commands, aka also Linux commands. So I'm on a Mac computer, and Windows has their own. I do have a cheat sheet for the different machines, so I can send you that link afterwards. I think it's also, it might be in the under the announcements. But let me go ahead and show you what we'll be doing. So essentially you have your root project folder, and then you might have other folders in there and that have files, or you might have some direct files, so on and so forth. So when you are working with the terminal, it's gonna look something like this. And if you're on Windows, it's called the command prompt. So here I am right at the beginning of my computer, right after I've picked the user of the computer. So if I do ls, that's going to show me all the directories and files that are on this machine for the user Cassandra Matos. I want to go ahead and jump into my desktop, so I'll do cd desktop, and what that means is change directory. So I'm going to change the directory to the desktop directory. And now you can see that it says desktop here, so it's telling you what directory you're in. Then if I do another ls, I can see what's in there. But I want to go ahead and just make a new folder onto my desktop. So you do mkdir, which is make directory, and then the name, so we'll say CFS lecture 2 Jan 23, super long, and we'll make that. And if we do ls, we can see that it is right here. So now that directory is made. I'm going to go ahead and change into that directory. So another cd CFS lecture 2 Jan 23. So now I'm in that directory, and now I need to make my files. So I'm going to do touch, and then you can do multiple files at once. So I have created 3 files in one line. Now if I do ls into here, I have those files here. So as you can see, the terminal is super fast. It will save a lot of your time, especially when you get really good at it. If you want to learn more about it and kind of become a master at it, I have a really good book and tutorial that you can go through. Be careful, because you can do a lot of damage inside of a you can mess up a lot of things, so you can do a lot of great things in there too. It's kind of that borderline of what you can do there. But as far as like just even going through files and file manipulation and directories and stuff like that, it will save you a ton of time. All right, so that is the terminal as far as what you're going to be doing for this course. As you move on to the next courses throughout the program, you'll be working more and more with the terminal. So I would kind of get friendly with it now, so you're more comfortable throughout the later on in the courses when they're asking you to do more with it. All right, so last thing that we're going to talk about today is source control, which is I think the last lesson of this course. Essentially what source control is a great tool for developers to manage files throughout the development process. It allows developers to write and test their code on their own computer. So let's say you're working on a project and you have 3 teammates, and each of you are going to be working on a specific feature. So you have your master skeleton, and then each of you branch off and you get like a copy of that skeleton. And then with that copy, you can write and test your code. So you're not ever breaking the main code, the master copy. You're just working on yours, and once yours works and it tests and it integrates well, then you can merge your branch into that master copy, and now that master copy is updated. So let's say you're working on a feature, you finished it, and you've merged it. Now Amy is going to come in and write her feature. She has the most updated master copy, and it tests well with yours, and so on and so forth. It allows you guys to work simultaneously, so you save a lot of time. So Amy doesn't have to wait for you to be done in order for her to work on her feature. She's working it on her own computer, on her own machine at the same time that you're working on it. And then once it's tested with the master copy and everything works, then everything can merge together, and then you'll have the most updated copy. A lot of good things about source control is that you can go back in time and trace the source of your bug. So it allows you to easily version your code. So you have 1.0, 2.0, so on and so forth. So if for whatever reason you do a merge or you update it and you're like, oh man, it broke, you can go back to the point where you knew it last worked. And that's why you want to do a lot of save points. So like, just like when you're playing like a video game and you have certain save points because you're in the middle of level 5 and you have to go do something. So you go and do your save point. You're not going to lose your place because you saved it. So you can go back to that step. Same thing here with source control. So in the curriculum, you're going to download Git Kraken. It's basically a GUI interface in order for you to connect with GitHub. Git Kraken is what's used.
GitHub downloaded.
I'm sorry?
I said I do have GitHub downloaded.
Perfect. Git Kraken is one of the many different GUIs out there. It's the one that's in the curriculum, so that's what I'm going to show you. If you don't like it, that is okay. You can find another one, or you can do it through the terminal. I personally like to do it through the terminal. I'm not a big fan of GUIs, but for beginners, it's a little bit easier to see. So what you do is you need a GitHub account. So you said you had one, but here we have GitHub. We have my GitHub account, and then I need to sign in here. All right, so we're signed in, and now I have, let me readjust all these. Okay, so here we have Git Kraken.
Cool.
So yeah, that's not for you, don't worry. So here I'm going to create a new repository. Basically, it's just like your project. And then you're going to have your repository name. So let's say test project. Then you're going to put a description. You can say what the project does in a little short sentence. You're going to make it public. If you're working for a private company or whatever, you can make it private, but you have to pay for GitHub in order to get that. And then you want to initialize the repository with a README. And basically a README file is just like an information file of what the actual application does. So I'm going to go ahead and create the repository. So now that has been created. So when I go to Git Kraken, I'm going to clone the repository. And I am going to clone it through github.com. I'm going to pick where I'm going to clone it to. So I'm just going to clone it to my desktop. And then here, I'm going to pick the repository that I want to grab. And it's not in here, so let me close this and try it again. There it is. And then I'm going to clone the repo. I'm going to open now. And then I have my repo. If I go back to my desktop, we can see that it is right here. Okay, so I've just cloned the project onto my desktop. So now I have my repo here. And this is the master branch. So that's that master copy I was telling you about. So if I go here and I open this repo in my editor, and I want to add some files. I don't have any code in there. I'm just going to write some code here. So now I have updated some code, and I go back to Git Kraken, and it shows right here in the top right-hand side, one file change in working directory. So I'm going to view the change, and then you can click on it, and it shows in green what's changed. So all of this code is brand new. So this is where you want to do a save point. So I'm going to stage the file. Essentially, you're just getting it ready to save it. And then under the commit message, you're going to write what you did. So added index file. Okay. And then you will commit the changes to the file. And that's essentially just a save point, right? So you've saved it. It hasn't put anything publicly. You don't do that until the end when you're pushing. The pushing, it just means you're uploading the most recent version. What you're doing here, this is all saved on your local computer, and it doesn't go back to GitHub until you hit that push button.
Okay.
Okay. So let's say at this point, this is the master skeleton file, and now Amy's coming along and she's ready to add the CSS. So we can go here and we are going to create a branch from this point. I'm going to call it Amy. So now Amy is working on her branch, and then she can write some code and then do her save points. And then when she's done, she can go ahead and merge that. But I need to write some code in order to do that. So let me just write some. Okay. So now if we go back here, view the change, stage, added filing, commit changes. So now Amy, and you notice that this is on Amy's branch. So
Yeah.
I haven't touched the master. Amy's doing this. This is only Amy doing her stuff. So now Amy's like, okay, I'm done with the styling. Now I'm going to merge it to the master. So all you have to do is drag it to the master and then merge Amy into master. So now the master is now updated, and it shows like this nice little timeline for you. Okay, and here like, okay, this happened, and then it came back here to the master. So now that we are back onto the master branch, we can push it to GitHub. So I click that push button. And then if we go back to GitHub and refresh, we have those files. And then the
nice.
comments.
Yeah, and it says 1 minute ago, 2 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago. Nice. Okay.
Yep.
Right.
And so to get started with source control, I would recommend Gitkraken, just so you can have this visual representation of what's going on. And once you get more comfortable with the terminal, the command line, if you want to convert to that, that's the way I like to do it. But this is a great way to see things. And I mean, I have to use this for work, to work with my coworkers. So it's definitely something that you should know. But we definitely, every developer has their own preference on how to do something.
Alrighty. Because I have personal projects that I've been working on with as I get to know this information more and more. I keep trying to add to it. So like right now, I've been trying to find out a way so that if somebody were to leave me a comment or a message, they have to input their name, last name, first name, last name, email, and then a message in the text area. And then I was trying to find a way to get that message sent to my email. So I've been trying all kinds of stuff. It's really hard.
A lot. It sounds easy to do, but it's actually a really tricky thing to figure out, especially if you're doing it from scratch. Because there's a lot of tools out there that you can just like import in, like FormSpree is one of them that allows you to do that. They have the code written for you. But
I saw that in an example once, but I thought it was just, a random email like gmail.com. But
yeah, you just in the code that they have there, you just set whatever that attribute equal to your email address, and then it will send it to your email address. But to build that functionality from scratch is actually a very tricky thing to do.
Okay.
So don't beat yourself up. It involves a little bit of PHP.
When I was doing the research, it said PHP. I'm like, well, I don't know PHP. So
yeah, building that functionality from scratch is for beginners is it's a task in itself. And it's funny because most people would think like, oh yeah, that's the easy thing. That's normal. That's everyday stuff. But
Well,
really
I
dig
thought the
into it.
action attribute would just get me there. So I'm like, oh,
Hmm.
just send it here because it's like mail to, and it just seemed simple enough whenever I looked at these examples. But I guess there's a lot of underlying brickwork
Yeah,
there.
there's server connections and all this jazz. Um, so by the end of this program, you would be capable of building that from scratch. But at these beginning stages, I would just use the form spree for now. And then as you get along, then you can kind of figure out how to build it from scratch. But yeah, that is a big task on itself. Um, but I like that you're playing around with it. And it does require you to know a little bit of PHP. So then you have to like learn PHP a little bit in order to, because what those action and method files are doing, it's telling it in PHP what to do with that information that's filled out.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But because I was just building because okay, so I didn't know anything about coding, and then it was kind of spontaneous to be part of this program. So
Hmm.
then when whatever his name Billy was like, okay, sure, well, like we're gonna get you accepted into this, and I was like, oh no. So I was like, I'm gonna dive into something I know nothing about. So I
I mean,
decided to do as
honestly,
much research as possible, and I did. And from there, I was starting to build a website already. So like the first week was definitely easy peasy stuff. But
mhm.
now the JavaScript, I'm like, oh, okay, no, tougher pill to
Yeah,
swallow.
get into the tricky stuff.
Yeah, but I'm
Um,
excited. I'm really excited.
Good, good, good. If you get stuck on anything, just hit me up. Just send me a Slack message, or if you prefer email, you can email me too. I
Okay.
also have office hours every Tuesday and Thursday, um, the hour before this lecture. Um, so yeah, you can pop in at any time, ask any questions, or shoot me a message. And if you
Okay.
want those extra problems, just let me know.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Did you have any other questions at this time about anything we
Uh,
talked about or didn't talk about?
no, I'm like I said, I'm getting through it little by little. So, honestly, I was rage quitting pretty hard when I was doing the for loop with the flour recipe. So I'm like, that doesn't make sense. They did something
Uh-huh.
wrong. I'm like, that's not okay. And I was trying to just like, you know, put a note in it and just like continue with the lesson. But I was like, no,
Hmm.
I gotta find my answers now.
Yeah, sometimes with coding, and it happens to every single one of us, that when you hit that point of when you're ready to flip the table over, you just need to just walk away and not even look at it, and then just take a break. Like come back in a couple hours, work on something else in your life, and then come back, because there are going to be times where you'll be working on something for like 3 days in a row, and it's just like it doesn't work, and you don't know why. And then you come back after a weekend, you look at it, and you're like, wow,
Oh, a semicolon
really?
right there.
Yes, it's the smallest thing every single time. It is so tiny every single time. And when you're frustrated and you can't see it, it's going to take you hours, days, weeks to figure it out. So you just need to walk away. It's okay to walk away from the computer. Um, but yeah,
That's
that's
good.
that's my best advice. Just walk away when it gets to that I'm gonna flip this table point. Um, that's happened to me a lot. So I understand.
Alrighty then. Well, thank you. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Was
Thanks for
anybody
coming.
here last lecture?
Last week, no one showed up last week, so I had a
Okay.
recording. But please
Alright.
keep coming.
I will. I just last time I didn't pay attention to the Eastern time.
Uh-huh.
So by the time I was already on there, I was like, why isn't anything going on? And then I looked back on it and I was like, oh, that's not Arizona time. Whoops.
Oh yeah. We put everything in Easter time just because it's easier to calculate. Because with Arizona time, with the known daylight
I know.
savings, everyone gets so confused.
It's much better though. I don't know
Yeah,
what the rest of the world is doing.
neither.
All right. Well, thank you so much. See you next time.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.